So welcome everybody to the Victory Garden series from the Civic Garden Center. This is Vegetable Gardening 101. It starts here. My name is Greg Potter. I'm the Community Gardens Coordinator here at the Civic Garden Center. The purpose of this short presentation is to kind of get you prepared for what to expect from yourself as a Victory Gardener and what to expect from our class series as we move forward. So what are we going to be talking about? So let's get started. As you explore any topic, if you can kind of get to the root of everything, pun intended, by answering the questions who, what, when, where, why, and how. So we're going to start off with who. And obviously you are going to be the Victory Gardener, but what we mean by who is deciding exactly what kind of Victory Gardener you're going to be. Who are you as a Victory Gardener? So some key questions to ask yourself. What is your interest level? Are you casually interested in this topic? Or are you going to literally go and get every single book out of the library and really delve in and try to find out just as much as you can about growing food? So be kind of accurate, really assess yourself correctly and honestly and figure out what that interest level is. And that'll help you take in these classes in a more effective way. What is your commitment level? So this is the one that I really want you to be brutally honest with yourselves. What kind of time do you have to devote to gardening? Can you do a half an hour to an hour a night? Or are you more somebody that's going to be able to do 2 hours a week or less? It's important that you kind of understand that part of yourself to set the correct expectations. What kind of resources do you have to bear? How much money can you put towards this effort? So while gardening does give a good return on your investment in terms of money, it does require some to get going. And sometimes the things that you can do that are resourceful and can minimize the amount of money are possible, but they're going to require more time. So that goes back to what kind of commitment level in terms of time can you provide. And then what's your style of learning? Is it about trying to read everything you possibly can? Are you going to be looking for all kinds of video resources? You're certainly going to have some with us throughout these courses. So how do you learn best? Think about all those things as we move forward. And then what? So the second question is what? When we talk about Victory Gardens, what are we talking about? What are we going to be teaching about? Well, we're going to be teaching about annual vegetable production. So when you take a look at all of those vegetables listed there, when you talk about your radishes or your tomatoes or your broccoli, pumpkins, those things that you typically plant and harvest from that same growing season, those are things that we're talking about. What's not going to be covered in this series, we're not going to cover fruit trees or berry bushes, or if you want to do some foraging, or some mushroom cultivation. While the Civic Garden Center may have some of those classes this spring, that's not going to be covered in the Victory Garden series of classes. And then we're going to skip down a bit, and we're going to get into the why. So the comprehensive answers of the who and the why are really going to determine what your goals are as a gardener. So why are you wanting to grow food? So I've written down food production here, and what I mean by food production is just literally trying to grow as much food as is possible on whatever piece of ground that you've decided is going to be your garden. Save money. Are you growing food to make that impact on your weekly budget? Is that the reason that you're growing food? Something that may happen if that's your goal is that may determine the types of foods that you grow. Is something more expensive than something else in the grocery store? Or is there something that you eat more of? So those things can kind of help you decide what to grow? Are you looking for healthier food choices? So if you're growing it in your backyard, you have a very clear idea of what's been sprayed on it or not sprayed, what it's been fed, and what kind of variety it is. So you can bring healthier food into your kitchen that way. And speaking of variety, you have the opportunity to have more variety. Typically, when you go to the grocery store, you're going to have possibly 2 or 3 different kinds of tomatoes that you can choose from. But if you grow in your backyard, you're going to have dozens and dozens of options there. Are you just looking for a reason to get outside? Gardening is a very healthy activity. Interestingly enough, they're finding out health benefits literally from just having your hands in soil. There's a lot of microbes that transfer off and are having beneficial health effects for emotional stability in adults. Recreation. Are you just looking for some fun? Are you going to compete with your neighbor to see who can grow the biggest or the juiciest or the fastest different types of vegetables? Or, as in my case, is one of the big reasons for your backyard garden stress relief. I like nothing better than to pull into my driveway at the end of the workday and go out into my garden space, grab some herbs to smell, or just watch the squash growing. And it really kind of helps me shed the day behind and kind of get myself squared away before I walk in the back door. And then when? So when we discuss growing food, what are we talking about? When during the year does that happen? Well, again, that's up to you. That's up to your time commitment. That's up to what kind of gardener you want to be. So I've broken it down into 3 different seasons. You've got a long season, which roughly will go from St. Patrick's Day to Thanksgiving. So you can start your potatoes, you can start your peas, St. Patrick's Day, spinach, some lettuce, some of those cool season crops. And you can carry some of those squashes and carrots and things all the way into Thanksgiving. Might need a bit of protection, but likely not much. And if it happens to be a mild fall, maybe nothing at all. And then you've got a short season. So the short season is basically from frost date to frost date. So you've got Mother's Day is typically right around the last frost date in the spring here in the greater Cincinnati area. We are in growing zone 6A. And then the first frost in the fall is roughly around the middle of October. I stretched it out a little bit to say Halloween just to make it easy to remember from holiday to holiday. Mother's Day to Halloween, that's kind of your short season. So Mother's Day, you can start putting your tomatoes out in your garden, your peppers, watching the weather a bit, but should work for you then. And then if you're all in, if you're one of those crazy people, you can go all year long. So here's somebody harvesting in February from their cold frame. They're harvesting crops. Are you that gardener? Do you have that level of interest and commitment? So where are you going to grow your food? Practically anywhere. So you can grow directly in the ground if you have access to it. If you are in an urban environment, we do recommend that you test your soil for contamination. Probably not a bad idea anywhere that you grow. Or you can grow in a raised bed. You can raise up out of the ground space. You can make your raised bed out of just about any kind of material that will hold soil and won't leach out any kind of contaminants. We don't recommend using tires to grow in, which we had seen in the past. But, this is probably a 10-foot by 4-foot raised bed, but you can make them longer than that. You can make them taller than that. It looks to be about 8 inches tall. A lot of variety, but you can raise up out of there. Or you can choose some kind of container. We've got an old wash tub here. You can do flower pots. You can do 5-gallon buckets. You can do small cups. And then those can go anywhere. So they can go on your back porch. They can go out in your yard. They can even go on your windowsill. A lot of herb gardens on kitchen windowsills around. So it can go practically anywhere, except you do need to consider that you're going to need 6 to 8 hours of sunlight a day. So if you've got that big shade tree in the backyard that shades your yard all summer long, then you may need to try to move around where that shade falls. Or if you're going to be putting it on a windowsill, maybe a south-facing windowsill. And you're going to need access to water. Now, I've written down here, inconvenience can be overcome. You can take water to your plants, but you want to minimize that as much as possible. So it's not necessarily a chore to stretch a hose, but it can become a chore to stretch 6 hoses put together. And that can take up some of that precious time that you've committed to your garden effort. And when you're watering, you may not be able to, when you're stretching garden hoses, you may not be able to weed as much. So if you can avoid it, get yourself close to the water source as possible. And then the last question is how. Now that's a question that's literally for us. We're going to take care of the how. All you need to do is take our classes. Join us back here every first Wednesday for gardening education. Every third Wednesday, we're going to be cooking those things that you're harvesting from your garden. And we're going to take care of the how. We're going to have all of our classes set up to be just in front of what you need to be doing that gardening season. So if you follow our classes, we'll walk you step by step through the entire process of growing food all season long. So we're going to start, for example, in January with how to plan your garden. We'll do soil health in March. We'll start spring crops out in your garden space in April. We'll be talking about seed starting earlier than that. Fall crop planting in June. Season extension in September. Seed saving in October. So we're going to take you all the way through the process of going from the idea of being a gardener to harvesting your vegetables. You can become a victory gardener and grow your own food. I want to share a couple of resources with you while I got you here. A couple of excellent books on gardening. The Square Foot Gardening book by Mel Bartholomew is a wonderful beginning resource, kind of ABCs of gardening in terms of like rules, and it's a very clear-cut sort of cookbook of gardening, as it were. And Elliot Coleman, The New Organic Grower, he's kind of my mentor, and I've read this book several times all the way through, and it gets popped open at least 3 or 4 times every growing season. He's a very cerebral thinker about growing, but always looks to make things as simple and as elegant as possible in your garden space. And then a couple of free resources for you. Seed catalogs. Seed catalogs are an excellent place to learn information. Just realize that they're also trying to sell you something. But if you only look at the catalogs for information, you can't go wrong at all. And avoid the temptation of buying way too many seeds, which everybody that grows food does exactly that. But we've got Johnny's seed catalog, the whole seed catalog, which is from Baker Creek. Peaceful Valley also has a wonderful one. And the Richter's one is specifically about herb productions, herbs. And it's a fascinating book to look through if you're at all interested in herbs. So that's it. So this is mid-December. Next week we've got our Healthy Holiday Meals cooking class, so join us here for that. Early January we're going to kick off that first planting your garden season. Stop back here, join us for that for sure. Get that garden going in the right direction. Effective planning really kind of helps you minimize a lot of issues later on. So we're the Civic Garden Center. We create community through gardening, education, and environmental stewardship. Join us to grow, learn, and share.